name is Brian Aschenbaum. I am the Dean here at the College of Business. Welcome to the first of our Executive Speaker Series for the fall of 2024. Rachael Ryan, the CEO and owner of Backyard Farms. So in our formatting tonight, basically, as you can tell by the cool overhead visual, we're going to do this as kind of a fireside chat. Going to have a few Q&A sessions between myself and Rachael, and throw it out to the audience. Might mix and mingle that up a little bit, but the idea, ideally, is interaction, right? We'd love to hear from you. If you have thoughts, just shoot up a hand, whatever. You know, if something occurs to you, I'll try to notice it, and we'll try to make this as free-flowing and interactive as we can. So, Rachael, if you just don't mind starting us out here, tell us a little bit about you, and tell us perhaps what is, for those who might not know, what is Backyard Farms, and what does it do?
Well, thank you. I'm Rachael Ryan, and Backyard Farms, we started off as a traditional farm that did regenerative agriculture. We raised animals, quails. We do gourmet quail eggs.
This thing's on.
Can you hear me?
This thing's a no-go for us.
Okay. All right. So Backyard Farms started off as a traditional farm. We do regenerative agriculture. We raise quail for gourmet quail eggs. Not the ones with the little hangy things. Those are the wild ones. We do domestic quail, sometimes called the Japanese quail or Pharaoh quail. We also do vegetables and fruits, and we were just doing traditional farming, but somehow we got involved into food manufacturing, freeze-dry food manufacturing. This wasn't something, if you had asked me 10 years ago, would I be a major freeze-dry food manufacturer in New Mexico, I would have thought you were crazy. But we went a long journey and wound up as such. So now we are the major freeze-dry food manufacturer in New Mexico at the moment. So that's the story in a nutshell of what Backyard Farms is and what we do. We've scaled back some of our farming at the moment, but we'd like to get back into that soon as our freeze-dry takes off and we hire more. We'll get back into more of the farming, but right now we use a lot of farm products from all over the state of New Mexico. Our freeze-dry foods, what we do is we use farm products from small farmers all over the state of New Mexico that they can't sell. So this would be stuff that has aesthetic imperfections to them. It might be a little wonky shaped, or maybe had some bug bites on it, or hail damage, things that they can't sell and would be waste. Winds up in landfills, feeding pigs, things like that a farmer would take a loss on. And we can repurpose that. We can take that food, we can cut off the bad parts, we slice it up, it's perfectly nutritious and delicious, and we can freeze dry that, and then we can get that back into the food system and feed a lot of people. New Mexico, for those of you who don't know, 1 in 5 children goes hungry, and we are one of the top food insecure states in the nation. So getting more food back into the food system is really important and what we are dedicated to. And this is a way to get food that would go into landfills and things like that into the mouths and stomachs of those who need it the most. And that's where most of our food is targeted toward. We sell mostly wholesale through a program that's called the New Mexico Grown Program. And this is a program that the state of New Mexico has designed to work with institutions like schools, senior centers, tribal centers, daycare centers that cater to low-income populations. They give them money to buy New Mexico grown products and to help supplement school lunches, breakfast, things like that, where these are some of the major meals for these low-income folks, and to help supplement it with nutritious foods rather than processed foods from Sodexo and things like that. To get more fruits and vegetables, to have more nutritious meals going out to folks who need it the most. A lot of these kids, these lunches and breakfasts may be the only meals they get. They may not have meals at home. So these become really important that these meals are nutritious for them. And so we can get these fruits and vegetables into those meals, into these institutions to help supplement these meals. So food that would have been waste is now really important in going to the folks and populations who need it the most throughout our state. So it's really important, and it really makes a difference getting these foods out there. It really touches me that we were able to do this. For instance, there was a daycare that's up in Clovis, and they called me one time, and these little kids, these are preschoolers, They can't read or anything, but they started serving our apple chips. When you freeze dry apples, especially the ones that are kind of at the edge, where they're starting to get a little mealy and you wouldn't want to eat them fresh, it's getting mealy because those starches are turning into sugars. They're getting really sweet. And when you freeze dry it, it concentrates those sugars and makes it candy sweet. And they're natural sugars. So when these kids eat it, it's sweet like candy. And a lot of these kids get junk food and things like that at home. And we're starting to change some of their eating habits. So this daycare was actually switching from giving them junk food and snacks at snack time to these apple chips and using them as rewards for the kids. So they got so used to eating these apples that now they ask for that rather than candy bars and junk food. So when they saw a box of our food arrive and they saw our little quail head logo, they got so excited and they said, "The apple crisps are here, the apple crisps are here." And so much that the director had to give me an email and tell me that the kids were so excited to see that the apple crisps from Backyard Farms had arrived. So this is changing the eating habits of young kids, and they say psychologically that when you start to introduce that at that age, it can set the eating habits for people for the rest of their lives. So if we can get them to eat more fruits instead of candy bars and junk food, you can set a pace for the rest of their lives. And in New Mexico, where things like diabetes are some of the leading health disparities that affect our region, that makes a huge difference.
We have to pass this. So if there was such a moment, I kind of imagine that when somebody found something, they have this entrepreneurial venture, that there's a eureka moment, I don't know, a lightning bolt, however you want to think about it, where it kind of comes together in your head like, whoa, why isn't anyone doing this? Or what was there, if there was one, what was your, I guess, if you want to call it your eureka moment where this, what is now the vision, fulfilled, what it was, if anything, that experience or that moment or the thing you encountered that kind of brought that idea in your head?
Well, I've gotten involved with a lot of food insecurity issues and was sitting on a bunch of panels. And I got really frustrated. I was sitting on a panel with a friend of mine from a nonprofit, and we were listening. And this group, to help deal with some of our food systems issues here in New Mexico, had decided that they were going to bring in a consultant from Canada for $50,000 to try to figure out what our problems here in the borderland region were with food. I, with my Irish temper, knew I was going to lose it and say something that was going to get me in trouble, so I had to step out of the room. And I said to her, "This is ridiculous. They don't have to spend $50,000. You can buy me a cup of coffee, not even a Starbucks coffee, a gas station coffee, and I can tell you and list off all the problems with the food systems issues that we have right here. You don't need to waste that kind of money. And if they keep doing this is why problems aren't being solved, and they won't be solved at this rate." And she said to me, "Listen, Rachel, if we're going to solve these problems, it's people like you and I. These people are never going to solve this problem. We've got to figure out the solution." So with that in mind, I put my brain to it to try to figure out what was going on. And it was one time when I was sitting there with a farmer who had just gotten turned away because she had a truckload of melons that were ripe. And you see, grocery stores and other places do not buy ripe melons. They buy them when they're underripe. That way, when you, the consumer, buys them, they'll get ripe on your countertop. And she got turned away, and you could smell those melons. They were at their perfect peak of ripeness. And I said, "Just pull over on the side of the road and you can sell that whole truckload before the end of this afternoon. They're perfect." And I thought, if you could only freeze frame those melons, they're at their perfect peak right now. And that's when it hit me, freeze dry. If you freeze dried these melons, they would be at their perfect peak for 25 years. So that's when I started going back and researching freeze drying. And not only does freeze dry preserve it for 25 years, it preserves the nutrition from the day you freeze dry it for that full 25 years. And I thought, wow, we could get this out to anywhere in New Mexico. It doesn't have the weight that it does when it's wet. It doesn't need refrigeration. We could get it to the most remote areas anywhere. And hopefully it wouldn't take 25 years. We can get it to where it needs to go. It doesn't need refrigeration. This solves so many of the problems that we have getting it from farm to table with fresh foods. This is the solution to our problems. So I turned around and I went to the USDA and I said, this is our solution. This is a solution to our food systems issues. Give me a bunch of money so I can buy a huge industrial freeze dryer and we can just start freeze drying. They laughed at me and said, yeah, right, Rachel, you're gonna have to do a whole feasibility study and all these sorts of things. So they wound up giving me a little tiny bit of money. I bought some little tabletop freeze dryers from Harvest Right that you see available, and we got to our feasibility study. And then COVID hit. COVID wound up being a great thing for us because everybody needed food. Food banks and things like that had lines, as you remember, going out into the street. Farmers couldn't get their food to the places they needed to go. So we were getting food, freeze drying it, and getting it out. We were in sales before the end of our feasibility study. I was able to deliver results in no time to the USDA, and that's when they came back to us and said, okay, you're right, you've more than proven what you needed to do. This is in need desperately. And we were able to get much bigger grants and get what we needed to get the freeze dryers we needed and get into business in no time. And it has been 4 years, and we're already in huge production, and it's just been a whirlwind since the beginning, from concept to where we're at right now.
So just curiosity question in the room. How many of the folks sitting in the room are either consider yourself right now to be entrepreneurial, or you're thinking at some point in your career you'd like to own your own thing, do your own business? All right, fair amount of hands up, right? So given that, thoughts you've got on the business side of it, maybe, putting this thing in place. I mean, it sounds like you went to a potential source of money and didn't get quite, but you had to ramp it up and bootstrap it from there. But what do you see as the primary challenge that you faced in this, in terms of getting this entrepreneurial venture off the ground? Besides maybe just merely we needed a better source of funding and we had to deal with a lot less than we hoped we might get. What's that big challenge? If you're giving advice to a future entrepreneur in this room, what might be a significant challenge that they're not even aware of, they don't even know to think of it, that they're going to face for whatever venture they might try to launch? Because it just doesn't occur to you until you're really in the middle of it and trying to launch this business.
Wow, there's so many things. There's a lot. Number one, making sure you've got the right team around you to provide advice and to provide help. When I started my business, I had no business background whatsoever. I was a scientist. I actually had worked at NMSU for about 12 years. I was a geneticist. My background's in population genetics. I had one class that I took, the business of science. It was the only business background I had whatsoever. So I had partnered with Arrowhead Center here at NMSU, and they basically gave me a crash course in business and everything I needed to know. I did not know what a pro forma was. I didn't know what angel investors. I didn't know anything from anything. And their advisor network and everything taught me everything that I needed for business. But I had to do the work. I had to do a lot of extra work to learn all those things and do that. So many of you are much farther along than I was, having a business background, but also surrounding yourself with good advisors. Someone once told me, if you make $100, you need to find somebody who makes $500. If you make $1 million, find somebody who's a billionaire. You always need to find a business mentor to guide you along the way. You never make enough that you don't need a business advisor to help you with everything along the way. I constantly, on a weekly basis, consult my business advisors along the way for challenges that happen. Find somebody who's been through those challenges and can guide you through and at least give you advice from experience. Because there's things that are in business books or online that are good but not good enough from somebody who's been there and has made that mistake and done the wrong thing in that situation and can tell you what not to do, which is every bit as valuable as having done it right. The other thing is deciding how to get your startup money. Everybody tells you, go for angel investors, go for investors. And I had an earlier venture that I had tried to go that route with and learned that that was not for me, not at all. I had some very, very bad experiences with that. and decided for this particular venture with the freeze drying that I was absolutely positively not going to do that. And I made that decision right from the very beginning. And I stuck to it, and I will continue to stick to that for a number of reasons. I'm not going to compromise on the values that I have for my company, one of which is that every bit as we're trying to help these food insecure populations with delivering our product, but we're also trying to help the farmers. So in some respects, we have a nonprofit sort of vision that's at the heart of what we're doing, and the first thing a lot of investors are going to try to do is to screw over the farmers and try to get our product as cheap as we can. And I've never done that with any of our farmers. When we buy the raw materials, I've never argued with them over price to try to undersell them, underbuy it. There's actually been a couple of instances where I told them that what you're asking is too cheap. I've grown that before. I know what it takes to do that, and you're never going to break even. That isn't cost. What you're asking for, you need to ask for a little bit more. I'm going to pay more for those apples or those tomatoes because I know what it takes. Because I need to have those farmers in business next year and the year after to keep producing that product so that I have material that I can keep selling my product. So I need them to be successful. I need them to be around, and that's really important in it. So you need to keep that long-term vision. In a corporate model, they're going to say, well, that farmer will go away, but another farmer's going to appear. This is New Mexico. We have a limited number of farmers that can only produce so much, and I need them to be just as successful. Their success will impact my success. We need to work together to both be successful for all of this to work. So keeping that vision of what you see for your company, and keep that in mind and never compromise in your values. Now that's been really hard, especially when I had an investor who wanted to put $1 million into my company and was dangling that money in front of me, especially when you were worried about paying your own electric bill and not sure if you can buy groceries and you're at that early stage of your business. That is really hard. And you will lose a lot of sleep over that. But stick to your values, because in the long term, that's going to pay off more than anything. And it has.
No, thank you. That's a great observation, right? You can't, you eliminate suppliers doesn't exactly help you. And if you concentrate the suppliers, they just, that doesn't necessarily help you either. So I had a speaker came in last semester, a gentleman who had a number of entrepreneurial ventures. And to that particular audience, those of you here might remember, he made what I thought was an interesting comment. I just wanted to get your sense of it as an entrepreneur. He said, for those of you thinking about being an entrepreneur and you're looking for that great idea to come along or whatever, he said, always try to be a painkiller, don't try to be a vitamin. You see what I'm saying, right? Solve someone's pain, don't just be like, hey, you'll love this. Just your thoughts on that. I mean, does that kind of track with what you're doing? And would you see backyard farms as a painkiller versus being a super awesome multivitamin?
Yeah, solving problems. I mean, we solve problems on two ends. For the farmers, we're a way for them to keep profitability in that respect, that they would lose all this product, these seconds that would wind up in a landfill. And it's stuff that they've put every bit as much energy into: water, fertilizer, supplies, time, that they would take a complete loss on. And many of these farmers are operating on very narrow margins, less than 10% margins. And a loss like that really can put them in the red at the end of the year. And we've had farmers tell us this: your being able to buy our product was the reason we were able to remain profitable this year, that it can be margins that tight. So we're solving a huge problem for them and keeping them profitable. And then on the other end, we're solving a problem for especially this New Mexico grown program, because they're giving money to these institutions for them to be able to buy food and keep this program, nutritious foods for these food insecure populations. But New Mexico, the growing season is only really from May to November. And for the rest of the year, people still need to eat and still need nutritious meals, but there's not a lot of fresh food available. However, freeze dry is available all year round. Once we freeze dry it, it's available. So from November to May, we're the only grocery store in town for a lot of them. And that's when we start getting lots of calls, and the phone starts ringing off the hook for us, and these institutions start reaching out to us to be able to buy product. And especially by the end of the year, April and March, they have to spend that money from the state or they lose it. They get deducted the next year from their grant money if they don't spend it. So we get calls off the hook. And freeze dry is something they can stockpile, versus onions and green chili. Well, how much is a preschooler going to eat of green chili? I mean, I know this is New Mexico, but still. And how much room do they have in the refrigerators and freezers to stockpile something like that to use the rest of the year? Freeze dry, it doesn't take up any room in your refrigerators or freezers. They can store this in a pantry. So they can buy apples, they can buy melons, they can buy tomatoes and all these other things that they can stockpile that they know they're going to use the rest of the year. So it's not a waste of their money. It's valuable in that respect. So we're solving a real pain point for that program, a real gap and a hole in the program. So it's 2 pain points. We're a double painkiller for 2 different customers in that sense.
So obviously, a problem that many entrepreneurs have, visionaries in business, is that you start out small, you're wearing all the hats, right? You're kind of doing everything. Mm-hmm. And at some point, just the matter of workload and hours in the day means you got to bring on people. So your thoughts on how you successfully bring on how do you find the right people that you can trust? Because you've expressed a lot to us that touches me about your values and how you want the company to be run and things you don't want to compromise on. So how do you think about, how do you find the right people who are not just going to be good enough in a talent sense to do the work, but also will enthusiastically embrace the vision that you have? And how did, for your own self, if this was necessary, how did you learn to let go a little bit and offload some of that work and not, and truly let them take some things over and relinquish some of the control over things that previously you had completely been doing?
Wow, staffing is always going to be your biggest pain in the neck. It's the simple answer for any small business owner. It's always difficult to find people who, no one's going to work as hard as you do for your business, pure and simple. But finding the right people to fulfill the right position is difficult. But you will find, and right now I can tell you that I have the best employees and the best workers. And when you find the right people to fulfill those right positions, that's when your business thrives. And my business wouldn't be where it's at if it weren't for my staff. And they're the best people there are. But finding them has been hard. It really is. Finding people who share your vision, believe in your product, and will work almost as hard as you do is really hard. And I don't think there's any simple answer for that. But when you meet these people, you can feel it. You can feel when you meet the right type of people out there. It's something that you won't find through a staffing agency or anything. You need to meet these people and feel that energy and feel if they have the passion for what you do and the knowledge and the experience. And sometimes they're not always what you think. It isn't about somebody who has the right degrees, the right paper resume. I've gone through people who have the perfect paper resume, but were awful for these positions, and I couldn't wait to get rid of them. And it's hard to get rid of people. It's hard to fire people. And then there's people who don't have a paper resume that they could write up for you, but they have been the perfect people for the right job. It's hard.
We're going to roll through and roll on with a couple more questions. The last question I asked, I was kind of curious. You talked about how you recognize these people, how you knew they'd be kind of the right fit, and it was sort of a it when you see it feel in addition to everything else. How did you then, good that you thought, okay, I found somebody who I think is good. So the second part of that question, how did you yourself internalize being able to let go of certain things? Being able to tell, okay, fine, I want to hire you and everything, but you've been doing everything right, for a while. So how did you, that's an important ability too, knowing what you can, when you can step back and take a hat off. How did you do that for yourself? How did you essentially get yourself into a place where this person's good and I know I can trust them to do this, and I'm going to not sort of micromanage it, or be simultaneously doing it right next to them?
Yeah, there's two things. At one point, you get exhausted. When you go for so many nights where you just have like 3 or 4 hours of sleep, on one hand, you're ready to offload as much as you can. On the other hand, you test people out. You give them assignments and things, and you try them out and see how much they can handle. And when they do a good job, you give them more. And when they do a good job with that, you start giving them more. You test people out with things and see how they respond. And keep giving them more and see how they work out. That kind of testing. And try to give them as much as they can handle. And when you start to see them struggle with things, pull back and recognize people's limits. And they may say, oh, no, I can handle as much as I can, because they want to impress you and they want to do good, but be able to recognize what they can and what they cannot do.
Okay. So one of the cliches of business education, right, is the notion of core competences. Right? What am I really good at? What do I do, I think, better than almost anybody else? What does my company do better than almost anybody else versus other stuff that has to get done, but I wouldn't call it an area of excellence, right? So for you, again, this kind of goes along with the people hiring and the knowing what to let go. Everyone's not good at absolutely everything. So as your business has grown, as you've brought on more people, I'd be curious, what are the things that you consider your core competencies? Like, I'm always going to run these pieces of the business. This is what I excel at. And what have you recognized in your own self as areas of, I did it at first because I had to. I'm glad to let others do this because I frankly think there are other people who would do it better than I do it as the business grows.
Yeah, recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses, doing those SWOT analysis of yourself and realizing that, and then making sure to hire people who are good at the very things that you're the worst at is really important to do. And then also, things you don't like doing. There's the things that you hate doing. Find people who love doing those things that you hate. The little tedious things. I hate analyzing numbers and doing those sorts of things. So finding somebody who absolutely loves that part and crunching those numbers. You love that? Great. You do that. Those sorts of things. People who love spending lots and lots of times with a customer and doing all that type of stuff. I don't have time for that. I got to move on to other things I have to manage. Finding somebody who's really, really good at that.
So to expand on that, just in this question, the notion of networking and its kind of the centrality of that, or its crucial role in the success or failure of your venture, did you find that this would have not even been remotely a success without a network you'd already created and you could lean on? Or did you maybe find that you didn't quite have the network that you needed when you started it, and it had to kind of be almost built alongside the physical aspect of the business, was this crucial human networking component that was also going to help it thrive? Just your thoughts on the importance of that, this kind of intangible piece, if you will, that's probably almost as important as money or the physical assets to how the business will thrive.
Yeah, your network, the people you surround yourself with, your mentors, your network, your peers, are so crucial and need to evolve with you along the way. The network I had that was pushing me toward the gourmet food and things like that was not the network that I needed. Some of it was the business network that was helping me to evolve and understand business and those sorts of things. But the ones that were pushing me in that direction was the wrong network. And when I shifted and got into the right network, and the network that I have right now, it's golden. It's very a synergy, that everything's in the right place. And it is the grants. They help us with the grants that we keep getting. They help us with the customers we keep finding. In all aspects. And when we run into challenges, and we still do, we still constantly run into troubles, but they're the people that help us to figure out the solutions, that keep us moving ahead when we run into road bumps along the way. The creative solutions, you're Still gonna have challenges. You always will have challenges in small business. That's just how a business runs. And there'll be times when you feel like you're running on E, when you are getting burned out, and they're the people who are gonna pep you up and remind you where you're going and how you're going. And so constantly reevaluate your mentors. And are they the right mentors? Are they pushing you in the direction of what your original goal for your business is and where you want to be? And are they keeping you on that track? Because you should have a track for your business and where you want to be at different stages. And if you're not making steps toward each of those stages along your business, if you've been stagnant at one stage and you're not moving forward, then you need to reevaluate your mentors and if they're really providing you with the mentorship that you need to be moving forward, or are you moving backward? If you're stagnant or moving backward, then you need to start reevaluating your mentors, and are they really providing you with the type of mentorship that you need? Because you should always be moving forward.
All right, well, now let's take some questions from the audience. So those of you here, students, et cetera, please, what questions have you got for our guest?
You got some questions? Please don't be shy. Got one question right here. Please state your name and
Sure. Hi, I'm Sean. My question is, where do you see the future of backyard farms? In terms of scalability, in terms of, is it something you can do across the region or maybe one day nationally?
Well, I forgot we have one link.
Yeah, that's part of our goal. We are going to scale up. In fact, we're in the process of building our new facility. We've already outgrown our current facility and are building a much larger facility. But then our goal is really to have satellite facilities all across New Mexico, so we're closer to the farmers in all the regions that we need to be, and to have these satellite facilities. But we're creating a model that we could then venture out beyond New Mexico for the Four Corners regions and beyond, to be nationwide.
Other questions? All right, down here in front.
Right here.
Hi, my name is Andy. I just have a question. How do you define success, and how would you measure your own success?
That is a good question. As a small business, as long as you have a positive bank account, you're on some successful route.
Fair.
Our success really is we have certain goals that we want to meet in terms of the number of institutions, the number of meals that we're able to serve, the number of populations that we're serving. We have goals that way that we're trying to meet, and the number of farmers that we're trying to meet. And every year we try to exceed what we did the previous year. So in that respect, we are meeting our success mentors and measures. We set those goals for our grants and things like that and tell our grantors, here's our goal for this particular grant and those sorts of things. And then in our heart, we're trying to set a model for improving our food system. We set out to do this project in a way to fulfill something that a lot of the nonprofits and things like that for fixing our food system here in New Mexico have been unable to do. And they told us we couldn't. They said, you're a for-profit business, and if the nonprofits can't do this, how can you possibly be able to do this? And we said, well, watch us. We're going to do it. And nobody thought you could do this and thought of freeze drying as a way to be able to fill this void in our food system. And here we are doing it, and now we're the biggest freeze drying food operation in New Mexico. And we're going to keep doing this and make this a model that could be followed by other businesses. And people say, are you worried about other businesses? There's nothing that prohibits them from doing freeze drying. And I said, join them. If we could solve hunger in New Mexico, that would be the most fantastic thing. But guess what? There's a lot of hunger in the rest of the country. That could also be. And if we solve hunger in the United States, guess what? There's a whole world out there that still needs to be fed. And so there's plenty of opportunity for this. So I don't think we'll get pushed out of the market. And if we solved hunger in the world, well then, that would be enormous.
The success stretch goal.
You got more questions? Professors, you have questions for the professors? Oh.
Great to meet you. My name is Juan. I'm a marketing professor here at NMSU. So I kind of have a two-part question. As a professor, is there something you feel you didn't learn in NMSU or that you didn't learn that I should be teaching my students? So that's one. Is there anything you'd like me to maybe be teaching my students? And then two, and I apologize, I don't know too much about the industry, but is there any concern about consolidation or corporates, corporate players dominating the marketplace anytime soon? Do you see the future still being an option for small farmers?
Running the lap floor in here, I'm sorry.
You're getting your exercise. So New Mexico is kind of an oddity. I was talking about this earlier with somebody. Compared to our neighbors, New Mexico is one of the only states in the nation that is still being led by small farmers. Most of the farms in New Mexico are still under 20 acres and are owned by family farms. Next door in Arizona, the average farm is about 400 acres. And in Texas, it's about 100 acres. And those farms in Arizona are mostly owned by Saudi businesses at the moment, interestingly enough. Take a look at that. Texas, it's still family farms that own most of these farms, but they're being contracted by corporations to buy most of their food. New Mexico, that's not what's going on here. So we have a lot of opportunity that we can evoke change. Still in New Mexico, most of the food we grow is exported out of the state, while at the same time, we import most of the food that we eat. So this leaves a lot of opportunity for you all as entrepreneurs to come in and fix some of this problem and stay here in New Mexico, because most of our academics are exported out of our state and leave NMSU and UNM and go out of state. But staying here and trying to fix this problem is a big thing, because of all the sectors out there, doctors, maybe you see a doctor a couple times a year. Hopefully you don't have to see a lawyer more than once a year. But you eat food from farmers several times a day. Try going without a farmer's product for more than a day or two, and you're not going to be able to do that for very long. But that food that's on your plate, farmers maybe made a couple cents on, but everybody else on their back made all that money. That head of lettuce in a grocery store that's maybe $1.50, farmers maybe made 25 cents of that. Everybody else made the bulk of that money on that. We need to turn that around, and that's one of the things at Backyard Farms that we're trying to do and change, is to make sure that the farmers make the bulk of that money. And I think there's ways that you as entrepreneurs can work with farmers to try to change that, and we can evoke that change here in New Mexico in a way that can't be done in any other state in the nation. Corporations rule almost every other state, and they have the tax-paying lobbying dollars to influence all of the senators, all of the congressmen, and they are the ones who get the USDA dollars to subsidize their farming operations. So only about 2% of USDA grant dollars go to fruit and vegetable farmers. 2%. All the rest goes to livestock feeds and things like that, and sugar, and soybeans, not edible soybeans, but soybeans for livestock, and stuffers for synthetic foods, what I like to call fake foods, things that look like food, smell like food, but have zero nutritional value. So pseudo foods out there, and they get subsidized. So I tried to go to the USDA one time and say, I want to get subsidized for soy, but I want to grow edamame, nutritious soybean that actually has a ton of vitamins, and if you mix it with rice is actually a complete protein. I couldn't get any subsidy for that from the USDA. I would have to grow a soy that you feed to cattle in order to get subsidized. That needs to change. And I can't change Congress. I can't change the Farm Bill. I can't change any of that to change that. But we can change some of our buying practices, some of our growing practices, and some of the businesses that operate here in New Mexico. So we can evoke change, at least on a state level, with how our state dollars are spent and how businesses are operated here. So that's what I would suggest for you to push for ag businesses to be started. Look for those, not just make an app for a farmer, but actually work with a farmer to do some real businesses that really make change.
All right, other questions?
I'll take a shot.
Oh, we got one here.
We got a question.
Hi, good morning. Are you allowed to distribute to restaurants, small business, or chain restaurants, or is it in Mexico?
Yes, these are yes, these are manufactured. So it's a manufactured food. It's licensed and can be sold to anyone. And we can actually, freeze-dried is actually considered a safe food, so we can actually ship abroad and can go international.
Other questions?
I'll take it.
Carlos, you got one? All right.
Or they steal the mic. Thank you. So, hi Rachel, I'm Carlos. I'm the one that sent you like a lot of emails. Thank you for being here. So we have a room full of students and professors, and you were in their shoes at some point. So this is the perfect chance for you to share some thoughts on your experience after college. Many of them will be, well, all of them will be graduating at some point. So how do you deal with the imposter syndrome, like thinking you were not enough at some point, or handling rejection from investors, partners, or anyone? What could you tell them out of your experience?
Wow, I know a lot of you might think that you're not good enough, but if your idea, there's somebody out there, there's something out there, and investors were not the right thing for me. So evaluate your idea. And if you really are out there for something that's going to change the world, something that's going to provide a benefit for humanity, I would really look at grants. I would really look at things like that if they're providing a benefit. There's stuff out there, and there's a lot of money floating around in grants and things that's available. There's the SBIR grant, which is for businesses and startups. Right now, it's $180,000 for 8 months, and you just have a proof of concept for your business. And there's all different sectors. There's the USDA for agriculture-based things. There's the NIH for health-based things. There's Department of Defense has one. There are all different sectors of the government for businesses that are related to those sorts of things. And they're pretty easy, fairly easy grants to get. That was actually how we got our feasibility study started up for our freeze drive, was actually through the SBIR. And then the state of New Mexico offers a program whereas if you've got an SBIR from the federal, the state will match your SBIR. So you can get state funding through that. The state of New Mexico has a science and technology grant that's open right now that you can apply for and get some money to start up. And you'll find with grants, once you get a little bit, you get the ball rolling and you'll get more and more and more and more. So look for some of those little grants. Arrowhead has some money out there through some of their programs to get some ideas started and things like that. So grants are a great way to get invested in. And with that, you don't have to give up any equity. You own 100% of your business and you make all decisions and things like that. You don't have to pay it back, like a loan or anything like that, and then you don't have an investor on your back telling you what to do for anything. So think about that. I don't think that's brought up enough to small business entrepreneurs. And it's an excellent way to do it because there's a lot of money out there that's just sitting in some of these programs. Another thing I would say is everybody touts the SBA. They have no money. They don't give you any money. They have loans that you have to pay back, but then you have to find someone to loan you the money. And I will tell you, banks do not loan any money to small businesses, so don't even think about it. That's the sad truth, and what I had to learn the hard way, so don't even look at that. But grants take a chance. You just have to make a compelling case that you have a great business idea. It really is the same as a pitch to an investor. And you actually have a much better chance because you have less competition as for some of these grants than you may have at some of these pitch events. So think about it.
We have another? Time for, all right, one more. This gentleman back here. I'll round up.
Thank you.
Take a look.
Hi, my name is Ronaldo. Was there any point that maybe you thought of giving up, and how did you overcome that?
Let's take more energy than it looks here.
Oh, so many times, so many ways, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're exhausted and things like that. But again, that's where having a great network, having your mentors, having people there to walk you off the edge of that mental cliff when you're ready to give up. And then taking a step back and always thinking, you know, let's get some sleep and think of reevaluating it in the morning has been one of the best things that you can tell yourself, because often that's what it takes. It's just rethinking about it again in the morning, and you remember why you're in it and what your passion is and why you're doing this. But again, you know, having that mentor network and going to your mentors and, you know, asking, is this roadblock, is this problem unsolvable? Am I at the edge? Is this the end? And they'll tell you, no, look, you know, you've been at this 1,000 times. I've been through this. You'll get through this. Just keep going.
Well, Rachel, thank you. We've about come to the end of our time, but I want to express to you on behalf of my students, the faculty, the College of Business, Arrowhead Center, et cetera, everyone who's here from the university, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you for telling us about Backyard Farms. I know that we all hope we want to see more awesome things out of you and out of Backyard Farms in the future. And personally, from my own heart, thank you, because I know these sessions, these speaker series, contribute enormously to the education of our students. So thank you for your time and dedication and willingness to share that with us.